I'm going to turn things over now, God and Skype willing, to our program officer in New York. This is Ryan Kelsey, and we owe it all to him. And so, Ryan, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Thank you, Ken. It's really a pleasure to get to talk to the group today for a minute. I'm sorry that I can't be there in person. I used to live on the West Coast. It's one of those humid days here in New York where I long to be back on the West Coast. But I hope to see you all in the fall. Ken had asked me to just say a couple of things about the trust and why we're investing in the CSU. For those of you that might not know, and then, I'm happy to answer questions or talk to anybody in the room later, just to tell you more, because I love talking about this stuff. The Helmsley Trust is based in New York City. As I said, we're a relatively young foundation, about 5 years old, but we have a large portfolio. We have given away over $1 billion in our short history, and a fair amount of that is in education. Over the last couple of years, we've devoted significant effort to designing a program that we think will affect change systemically across the whole country, both in the K-12 sector and in higher education. And in particular with higher education, the idea is to affect both the quality and quantity of our STEM graduates. We need a more diverse talent pool in the STEM domain, and we need more of them all over the country, especially in California, if you look at some of the workforce projections. So we set our sights early on the Cal State system for several reasons. One, you have the talent pool that we're exactly targeting. You demonstrated your readiness in terms of all the terrific pockets of work that are going on many of the campuses. And we're just looking to consolidate that, grow it, and learn from it as best we can. And just to echo what Ken said a moment ago, we want to learn from this because our intention, and it's already happening, is to do these kinds of efforts all over the country. And we'll only be successful if we learn from you what's working, what's not working, what needs more attention, and how to make the best of the limited investments that we're able to make all over the country. You may or may not be aware of some of the other efforts that we have going, but beyond the project we're doing with Cal State, you might take a look at some of the projects we have going in particular disciplines, engineering and computer science in particular. Some of the campuses, if you already are engaged in those efforts, congratulations. It's terrific. We look forward to looking for synergies between this project and other projects as well. And I don't know, Ken, what else could I say? Is there more you were hoping that I would weigh in there somehow?
Great. Thank you very, very much. I didn't warn you, Ryan, that this was going to be a Q&A.
Yeah.
But I'm going to hit you with one follow-up question. Ryan is among the program officers that I've worked with, particularly informed on higher ed challenges generally. He's one of those folks that's really, really fun to talk to about these things. And he let us know.
So is Ken.
He let us know early on that it's that gap closing ability of the CSU in particular that was attractive to Helmsley. So I've sort of shared what you had to say to us. As we go about that, do you see any particular contribution from the side of California that we could be making? Is there one thing or another in particular that the rest of the country could benefit from among the things that we're learning here? I stumped you, or the picture's frozen?
I think
oh, there you are. You're back.
Yep,
I swear to God, it was like perfectly timed, Ryan. You were like, the image froze, but now you're there.
Yeah. Okay. Hopefully Skype will stay with us for a couple more minutes. What I'm looking for, well, look, to be perfectly candid, I'm looking for you to prove the cynics wrong. I'm looking for you to show how a set of campuses that, frankly, needs to improve its graduation rates overall can do this in a really substantive way. I think there are some people who believe that, our STEM professionals ought to come from just the most elite institutions, only the best and brightest, that's really kind of an excellence track that we need to look for. But We don't think that's true, and we don't think it's actually possible to serve the country just with that kind of a framing. We really want to see the Cal State campus model how to do this via access-oriented institutions that serve diverse populations. And so I suspect there are going to be some specific things that you're doing that work that other places don't know about, that are seeing the changes coming but aren't at the point you're at in terms of the kind of students you've got, the kinds of issues that you've got. So I'm really hoping we can model that, because I can say this because I lived in California for many years. California is often at the cutting edge of what happens across the rest of the country, and so we really want to see, what might propagate elsewhere, whether that be other large states with growing Hispanic populations like Texas or Florida, or here in my home state of New York now, where again we have a large state system. Similarly needs to make improvements, but we're looking for the right combination of things that we think will really make a difference, and you can tell us a lot about what works.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Let's give him one more round of applause. And
No
Ryan,
applause.
we're going to sign off with you.
All right. Good luck.
Okay, great.
No applause for me, though. Yeah.
Okay. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. As he was taught, one of the things that I really like about him is that sense of we are an access-oriented institution, right? That we're not, it's one thing to improve STEM degree production when you're a very selective institution. It's another for the challenges we face in the CSU. And we really feel that mission strongly. We like it that we cover the long ground, that we change lives. It's what makes most of us work as hard as we do. I think that's especially true and vivid on this particular campus. It's why I was so excited to have the meeting here at CSU Dominguez Hills. At this moment, I want to thank Jaime, John, and Ruby at the Locher Student Union for all the help they've given us in making the meeting happen, and also Dawn Cook in the College of Education, who put together a lot of the logistics for this meeting. But above all, I'd like to thank our next speaker, the Provost of CSU Dominguez Hills. Many of you know her. Please join me in welcoming Ellen Jun.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you. Can you hear me with the mic? Is it working? Can you hear me? Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you. I want to give you a very generous and warm welcome to our campus. As Ken says, I wanted to share a little bit about our campus and why this campus is so particularly poised to host this conference, and then to give you sort of an outline and way of thinking outside of the box as you continue through your activities today. So first of all, I want to start by saying that I am actually only in the job here since January. So I've been here, 5 months, 6 months, 5.5 months. But I'm actually a veteran of the CSU. I started 28 years ago at Cal State San Bernardino, and then moved to 4 other campuses. So I've been at Fullerton for the most of my career. So I have some Fullerton colleagues here I know. Then I went to Fresno for a short time, 3.5 years, have colleagues there, and then San Jose most recently. So I want to thank everybody here, because to me, the mission of the CSU is so critically important for our state, because we are the largest system of its kind in the nation, and it's wonderful to see that Helmsley is focusing in on our system because of the strength of what we do here in California. When Ken called me and asked if I'd be willing to host it here, I said absolutely yes, because first of all, I love Ken, and the kinds of things he does is so innovative, and it really helps to galvanize, I think, what's happening across campuses. We have 23 campuses, but on the other hand, what we do individually at each campus, we can learn a lot from each other. And even within a campus, we can learn from other folks that are doing similar related kinds of things, and we still are often siloed even within our campus. So the brilliance of this particular conference is that you will be at your tables with other people from your institutions to think about this. And as Ken mentioned, our campus is of historic significance for this kind of an effort, because of the 23 campuses, we're only just over 55 years old, but we have, and people tend not to remember Dominguez Hills. It doesn't get in the news very often, et cetera, and maybe that's a good thing. But we have about 14,670 students, and we have the lowest graduation rate in the system. So when Ken speaks about access and excellence, this campus is poised to help deliver on that promise. So part of the reason I am here is to really take very close look and a very active, aggressive effort, a campus-wide effort to improve our graduation rates. We're at 28% graduation rate for the class of 2000, I think it was 2007. And 2008, we're actively working on getting 23 more students finished up this summer, and we'll hit 30%. So that's a landmark for this institution, because we've tended in the past to have the most underprepared students from the underprepared school districts here. But so we're on a path to moving upward. We are the most diverse, underrepresented campus in the system. 87% of our students are students of color. So we have the largest URM percentage. Cal State LA is like within a point of us in terms of diversity. So we have a fantastic student body, fantastic faculty, and we're now going to try and launch efforts to try and improve student success. We are both an federally designated MSI as well as an HSI, and have grants to support our HSI student population as well. And so what I wanted to just share with you a little bit is part of, again, the reason you're here is related to Helmsley's interest in STEM. And as you've heard, there are national data and reports showing that the country is losing ground in terms of our STEM graduates and STEM prepared graduates. And then if you also look at the news, there's trends to show that the baby boom generation that is about to retire and sunset into retirement, they are perhaps the most well-educated generation of its time. And so if we are going to try and maintain that edge and exceed that edge, what we're doing here in the CSU is going to be absolutely critical, completely critical in graduating and preparing, motivating, and supporting more students, particularly students of color and women, to go into STEM. And usually when you have a STEM effort on campus, sometimes that divides the campus. The campus thinks, okay, well, what about all of those of us in the humanities or the arts? You know, where are we? And so some campuses have moved to STEAM. You've heard of STEAM. You add the A for arts in there as well. But I think in everything that you do, whether you are STEM focused, being literate in science and math is an absolutely critical skill, I think, as a participating citizen, as a human being, later into life as well, lifelong. So I'll just share with you a little bit about what we're doing here at Dominguez, and then you can take some of these ideas back, and you can even go back and tell your provost that some of the things that we're trying to do here. I'll just share with you, 3 years ago, we received a grant, $1 million grant from the Annenberg Foundation to set up an endowed professorship in STEM. And so we're about to make good on that effort to try and put in some co-directors. One of the co-directors here in the College of Education, another one in the College of Science and Math. And what we're doing there is to create a network of faculty who will be interested in teaching and improving STEM courses. Okay, so for this coming year, we are going to be searching for 16 new faculty, and 9 of those faculty the deans have designated as STEM related. And they will come together, hired together, knowing that they have other colleagues who care about STEM. They will then join additional colleagues on campus. So the deans are working right now as a group to create a STEM cluster, if you will. Okay, and then that will be infused with the other kinds of things that we're doing on. We have an advising task force, we have a student success task force, and we're trying to bring all of those course redesign, use of technology to improve. We've done experiments like this at prior campuses, just an example, at San Jose State in the engineering circuits and electronics course. They flipped the course. This is a course that normally has a 59% pass rate, so 41% of students are failing. When they flipped the course using online materials, in this case it was online materials that were supplemented through edX, the pass rates went to 91%. And so that means that this was a required course for engineers, so that means it allows more students to enter into the engineering pipeline, which is, of course, a key ingredient in STEM. Here at Dominguez Hills, we don't have an engineering, but these are areas that we're going to explore. So what I would say to you, when you work in your groups, talk to each other, because each of you from your campuses are doing something, whether it is Summer Bridge or whether it is high impact practices. We're launching a high impact practice symposium and community learning communities for faculty this fall. All of those things relate to student success. And if you can improve student success in those arenas, particularly in the STEM fields, which are harder courses in many cases for students to pass, then you're all working together as a team. So sharing with each other, learning not just from your own campus, but from other colleagues in the room, I think will be invaluable experience for all of you, because the power is put a bunch of smart people together, like all of you, you're going to generate incredible solutions and new strategies. So thank you again for being here today, and it's exciting. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day in our beautiful campus. If you get a chance, walk down to the library. We have a beautiful library that you might want to take a look at as well. Lots of beautiful art in there. So thank you, and enjoy your day.
And I do love that library. It really is wonderful if you get the chance, but we won't give you the chance. It also has, by the way, the CSU archives in it, the historical archives. It has very high resolution photographs of our early days. You can see John F. Kennedy at a commencement address at San Diego State, for example. It's the whole, all system wide. Really cool place. But I digress. Ellen mentioned she's been on the job just since last January. Our next speaker has been on the job just since last Monday. and her first assignment was, we've got this conference coming up. Do you want to make it happen? But really, it's fun to work in the chancellor's office. So we not only have the conference, we have the logo, the website, the streaming. Craig and his team at the back there, I didn't thank earlier. They are wonderful about recording this. Please give them a round of applause. This meeting will be available for those members of your team who couldn't join you here today, because this is mostly a project about getting people in different parts of the campus to work together. And we realize putting a cap on attendance of 6 per campus kind of defeats that purpose. So we're hoping you'll bring messages back, but we also want to make sure that anything you hear today is available verbatim to those people on your campuses. You have Dawn's bio in your folder. I'm going to turn things over to her now to describe the shape of the project for you. The one thing that you should know about her that's not in the bio is just how extraordinary she is. She really did hit the ground running on this project, and all of us who were involved in putting the project together and selecting her are looking really forward to working with her and with you over the next few years. Please join me in giving her a round of applause.
Thanks, Ken. I have comments that I didn't get a chance to memorize because I've just been slightly a little bit busy. So I hope you don't mind that I'm going to sort of read them to you and stand at the podium. But first of all, I want to thank you all so much for taking this interest in the STEM collaboratives. And of course, as Ken has said, I've literally only been here for 2 weeks. I moved here on Sunday 2 weeks ago and started on Monday. So it's been sort of a whirlwind tour. I've just come on board, as he's mentioned, as the Senior Project Manager, and will be working closely with you on this endeavor. My role this morning is to share with you some of the pertinent information regarding the project's structure in order to assist in developing your ideas for the proposals that you plan to submit. The overall goal of the project is to provide immersive educational STEM experiences, as you know, beginning during the summer before freshman year of college and continuing through the student's first year in the CSU. We are looking for proposals that will incorporate and integrate high-impact practices that are evidence-based on these 3 concurrent fronts. The first is the summer STEM experience prior to the fall of the freshman year. The first-year experience programs that cross departmental, disciplinary, and divisional lines. And if you look in my bio, you'll see that's something that I hold very near and dear to my heart. I've done that at my previous institution, Stevens Institute of Technology. We are also looking for proposals that will incorporate the redesign of introductory gateway courses, critical, as you know, for engagement and success in STEM. And then just to give you some statistics, I was an historian before I got here, so I have to throw that in. Nationally, data have shown that underrepresented groups who initially pursue STEM degrees, and I'm not sure if you all know this, are about 40% less likely to complete them than their counterparts. So obviously, closing the gap is important for increasing participation, specifically by the URMs. We want to retain those students who declare a major in STEM and seeing them through to degree completion, and that's really what this project is about. So according to the Business Higher Education Forum, one way to help improve access and retention in STEM is, as you are aware, summer bridge programs. Some additional programs to consider when you're thinking about your proposals include research internships earlier in their academic experience, freshman research experiences, cognitive tutors, multiple mentors, and student learning communities. We hope to see proposals that also touch upon dispositional learning and non-cognitive learning along with subject proficiency. So for example, and I'm going to throw some terms at you, they may or may not be familiar, but they're things that are sort of important in thinking about dispositional and non-cognitive learning. So self-efficacy is the belief about one's abilities, an estimate of one's confidence for successfully accomplishing a particular task, and I'm sure we've all been there at some point. Resilience is the ability to manage or cope with adversity or stress in innovative ways, and resilient people bounce back from adversity. Attribution is the belief about the cause of one's success or failure. So therefore, developing and enhancing these skills contributes to student success. Now, I know that you know this already, but as of yet, these have not been supported centrally, so this project is attempting to do this. In addition to content knowledge and academic skills, students must develop sets of behaviors, skills, attitudes, and strategies that are also critical to academic performance in their classes, but are not reflected in test scores. What matters most for college graduation is not what courses students take or what their test scores are, but how well the students perform in those courses. Increasing student success in STEM, and I like STEAM particularly among underrepresented minorities and women, would deliver great benefits to employers and regional economies by simultaneously helping reduce racial disparities in income, educational attainment, and career opportunities, and that's what we're striving for. Thus, in thinking about your campus and its population, programs that are already in place, and what you feel is necessary at your campus to advance STEM education, be innovative, but also integrate what you may already have in place. Again, you know better than anyone what will work and not work on your campuses. What we are providing through the STEM Collaboratives project is the support for your initiatives at the system level. Our goal is to assist in any way that we can to help you increase student success in STEM. I'm sort of considering myself fully available to you at any time, and you all have my email address. Successful proposals will intentionally integrate, as I mentioned previously, all three of those interventions: summer STEM, first-year experience, redesign of gateway courses, woven into a comprehensive approach, developing networked learning communities that will build an evidence-based case for long-term changes to STEM education within the CSU, and also establishing a model for others to follow. Think of me, as I mentioned, as your go-to person. I'm here for you. Thanks so much.
All right, we're going to dive back in and just find out what you make of this so far. Everyone ready? So I warned you I was going to call on people at random and ask for concise, insightful observations about the layout and premises of this project. Are you all in suspense? Kiana, hit us.
Thank you. So some of the things that we were talking about at our table is the focus on starting earlier, like the summer before they come, is a great way to go. One of the things we found was that there's a great opportunity from their initial contact with our institution when we admit them. And sometimes there's a bit of a disconnect because early on when we admit students into our institution, they're getting the messages that they're coming in, but then they get these other conflicting messages when we have requirements like early start and other things like that that create, in some cases, confusion. Sometimes when we talk about self-efficacy, and then telling students that they're not able to take courses that count towards GE and that they have to start early in the summer. In some cases, they won't be allowed to be admitted in the fall. All of those things impact students. And so there are some mixed messages that maybe we do need to address as a system as it relates to our approach to deploying the interventions that address the areas that we're interested in addressing. But some of the other things that we talked about was actually gathering the data about our students beyond just things like test scores, and we were talking about using the SERP that Harry at UCLA offers so that we can look at some of those variables that she mentioned earlier around academic self-efficacy and those other things that we're interested in learning about with regard to our students.
Thank you. What I love about that is how student-centered it is, right? That we're thinking about how it feels from their point of view, and then also how the messages that we send them from various departments, offices, people who are not naturally connected to each other may trip over each other as we're trying to present a consistent story about whether or not they're right for this major. Really helpful. Yeah, thank you. Does anyone else feel like sharing what you were just talking about at your table? Wonderful. Okay. Doesn't mean you're off the hook.
I'm Sharon Anderson from Cal State Monterey Bay, and one of the things we talked about is how do you tell students that they have to pay money for a summer experience? How do you institutionalize that? So that's not a comment, that's a question.
Very good. We're here to help you, and here's the price tag, right? That's the message that we have to figure out. Is that really what we're telling them? Is there a way around this? How do you present that? Good. Thank you. Yes.
I'm Stacy Gleixner. I'm an engineering professor at San Jose State, and I'm the director of our college's summer transition program. And one of the things we were talking about was the gaping hole, as we see it, is that this is written for students who are ready to hit the ground running the first year. And for us, those are the mid to high level students. And where we have the problem, particularly with first generation underrepresented groups, is the remedial students. They're 4 semesters away at least from first semester calculus and physics. And how can we energize them about science and engineering?
Thank you. And that question of remediation haunts us, right? That was the one thing after Ellen made her points up there on the stage when she heard me give you the prompt of what are we overlooking here? How is the thinking so far? She just took me aside and said remediation, right? Especially because of the campus we're on where the needs are so deep, but really system-wide. Man, it's hard to work on STEM without working on readiness. Really good point. I got time for one more. I'm going to pick on Cal State LA and Stephen Jones.
Steve Jones, Associate Dean of Undergraduate Studies. Our table is half Northridge, half Cal State LA. And we agreed that remediation or developmental preparation is key for our students because 70% roughly of them come in needing that. And we throw them a lifeline, but it's a very limited lifeline, isn't it? It's a course in math and a course in English taken one per term until we hope they get to where they need to get to. And that's just not enough. It's just not enough. We know that the bar for STEM majors is very high. It's a tougher objective than a lot of other majors. And when they get into their sophomore year taking the courses in science and in math that they need for their major, many of them, while they got through the developmental courses, are not really prepared to succeed at the level that they need to succeed. And so the challenge is, as Sandra was suggesting, to make this sustainable, to make this a broad enough program that it really includes the majority of the students, not the handful who get into research projects. Harold said, well, one way to get these students engaged is to get them into research. Yes, that works, but there are a limited number of spots, and it's for students who aren't commuter students, right? You can't come 20 minutes on the bus, as many of ours do, 30, 40 minutes, and do the research project what you need. So lots of challenges, but heading in the right direction. Thank you for helping to spearhead this and give us hope that maybe with more focus and more dedication, we can bring more students to this goal that we all share.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any closing comments or thoughts before we shift? Yeah, Ed.
So Ed Sullivan, ADP Institutional Research at Cal State Columbia. One of the things that really emerged as at least for me, and I've been able to sit in on other conversations, so I may have had a little more insights on it. As you think about the window for how long this grant-funded activity will run, you're really looking at the first year. And so the question becomes whether or not course redesign can be authentic in that window. That's one of the puzzle pieces. It probably has high value for beyond the point of the grant, but you don't have a measurement point for your redesign. And so the other question is the goal of this grant just to get you from
the first summer through to the next fall? Or is it really about getting them well beyond that with the kind of core skills that they need to be able to get that much further? And I think if you use that as your informational point, then maybe you do something different during those three legs of the stool than what you would do if you were just trying to carry a student from the first summer through to the fall of the following year.
Great, great. Thank you. And I really like how that dovetailed with what Stephen was just saying too, right? As focused as we have to be on remediation and readiness, that's hardly the end of the story. We really need to catapult them through the rest of the baccalaureate degree. Thanks for that. And as you think about the premises of this project, where the landmines are, we will be continuing to check in with the participating campuses and to invite those that aren't funded on this round to stay in touch with us to the extent the interest is there for feedback exactly along those lines. We really do need to tap into your expertise to do a better job at this system-wide, to make it really systematic and pervasive. Along those lines, I am especially excited to introduce our next speaker, Adriana Kazar, education faculty at the University of Southern California. Her work, believe it or not, spans 3 areas that are all of immediate relevance to what we're working on here. She has worked in STEM student success. Many of you already know her from the Project Kaleidoscope, Keck-funded project around creating frameworks for STEM student success. She's also done a lot of published work on institutional change, which is how I first became familiar with her, because that's kind of what we're about. And then very recently, she's been looking into faculty, the changing nature of faculty work, and the changing nature of the faculty itself as an increasing number become part-time. And when we look at the interventions that matter in those opening intro courses, those gateway courses, we're really looking at all 3 of those. At the STEM student success, a lot of those faculty are our part-time faculty, and we need long-term institutional change if we're really going to make a difference. She's also grading us. She's the one evaluating this project. So we've broken this out into 2 parts. In one, she'll present her take on the project, and then I'll moderate a Q&A between her and you, where we can find out more about what exactly we should be keeping track of during the work. Please join me in welcoming her. Did it work? Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Ken, very much. I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to move out of the light. And it's great to see so many people here. I wanted to share one personal story because just on Sunday, I was at our son's graduation from UC Riverside. And it made me feel really hopeful and inspired for the work of this project. Being on that campus, it was the most diverse graduation ceremony I have ever been to. It was incredible. The messages that I heard were ones that I think are what we're trying to instill a lot in this project in terms of systemic and cultural change. So while we are talking about these pieces, you know, remediation's a piece or undergraduate education, what we're really talking about is how do we really change the culture around STEM? And that's something I could see at UC Riverside. The culture had changed. And many of you may be familiar with, they now have the #1 retention and graduation rate of students of color in the country. That is really impressive, and I could see that. But I could also feel it in all the messages from everybody who spoke at the graduation. They talked about community and sense of belonging all the time. They talk about the people. They kept saying, you know, the buildings don't matter, the classes don't matter. It's the people who matter. The people make the sense of the belonging and make people succeed. It was that kind of culture that I think we're hoping to really begin to work at through this project, to think more systemically, to think about how we can all contribute to a changed culture. But that takes looking at a lot of different pieces, so that's part of the start of this. And so I was really inspired that we can do that. And Tim White, who was at UC Riverside, is now the chancellor of the CSU system. And I think he brings very much that ethic and that sense of leadership to the overall system. And I'm hoping that then he will be very supportive of these kinds of efforts in one location, he was able to really make a difference that we know, that we have data to support that that kind of leadership can make a difference for students. So I think that's a good way for us to sort of characterize or think about the broader charge of this. And what Ryan Kelsey was really saying in his message, like, he believes that we need to think about change in a more systemic way when it comes to STEM. And one of the reasons I agree with him is I've been involved with 2 projects that really involved looking at the research. What do we know? What's the evidence say about STEM student success? And I've been involved with 2 projects that were trying to do a meta-analysis, looking at all the research that we know. And they all converge on the same idea. And that idea is that in the past, we've thought of student success in a narrow way. Either we looked at the instructional practices of faculty, or we looked at a support program. We looked at kind of very narrowly what might be done to help students succeed. And we really did center our efforts at the departmental level, and often even just on a program. Sometimes we didn't even touch many of the departments. And so we've had limited success. And those projects that have had success took a different approach. And they looked at STEM student success as a series of interrelated activities that help propel students. So they looked at, as we're going to, summer bridge programs, and then they looked at initial advising, and then they looked at first-year experiences, and then they looked at introductory courses. And they said it's a whole series of things that go on at the institution that need to be addressed to create STEM student success. And it really said we need to move beyond kind of, for a long time, people looked for the silver bullet. What's the program? For a long time, it was undergraduate research. That's it. And lots of campuses pursued that. And it's a great thing. But that alone is not going to create STEM student success. So all the research converges on looking at these multiple systems of supports. And that's what I'm so excited about this initiative. It's the first one to really embrace this idea of putting together multiple kinds of supports for students. And so one of the initiatives that I was involved with was a National Academies of Science National Research Council consensus study, and it was looking at barriers and facilitators of student success. And there were some other people in the room here who participated in that same effort, which is ongoing, and our report isn't out yet. But we really sort of outlined how the way we've thought about students, the way that they go through STEM, is much more complicated than we thought. And one of the exciting pieces out of this that relates to the CSU is the number of overlooked students in community colleges that you should be tapped, that are interested in STEM, and that we need to look at things like our articulation agreements that are really significant to STEM student success. So some of what we talked about, many of them were an interconnected set of initiatives within the institution, but we also talked about those things that go beyond the institution. There are policies around tuition at the state level that impact student success. There are articulation agreements that affect student success. So we even noted that there's multiple layers of issues that need to be addressed, but we've even ignored those sort of support systems within the institution itself. And we came up with this metaphor. Maybe it'll help you. Does everybody know what chutes and ladders is? Okay. So the circuitous path, right? That's what students go through, a very circuitous path. And we'd like to make it less circuitous. But at least what we know right now is they get to the chutes and they fall down, right? And that's what's happening is they're going down the path and they go down. And then when they fall down, we give them a step stool. That's our one little intervention. And they don't have the ladder. They can't get up. They can't get back out. And so this metaphor of what we've got to do, the interrelated set of strategies that we can offer them is the ladder. And once they've gone down the chute, it helps them to actually get back on the road. So I want you to think about that metaphor as potentially a helpful metaphor of what's the work we're trying to do. We're trying to create these interrelated set of strategies on campus that will become the ladders that make students successful. The other project that I've been involved with, and many of you in the room have been involved with this initiative, involved many of the Cal State institutions. and it was funded by the Keck Foundation, and Mercedes is here, I think, somewhere. There, Mercedes. Thank you. And this was a really also helpful initiative that was based off of national reports about what makes students successful. And the underlying assumption of the project that brought together 11 campuses in California, many of them CSUs, to examine how we might address STEM student success from an institutional level. So again, moving beyond a program or a department. And the underlying assumption is if we're going to make STEM students successful, we've got to think about how we work with student affairs. How do we, in academic affairs, partner with them? You know, how do we even go to multiple divisions within academic affairs? I mean, advising is sometimes in academic affairs, but the faculty don't reach out to them. So how do we look at the various departments, programs, and units across a campus that are necessary to create institutional level change? And we learned, though, you know, from these projects, one of the things we learned is it's really challenging for people to change their paradigm about how students are successful. We are very much locked into a narrower set of the ways that this change comes about. And it's hard for us to think about collaborating with different people across campus. But that's what it's going to take. Collaboration is what's going to make students successful. And this also, not only for the research on STEM student success, but the research we know on student success in general is that when various people across the institutions collaborate, it benefits the student. So that project also reinforced the need to think broader about institutional and cultural change, and that there are these multiple support systems that need to be in place. So what we're going to do, hopefully by the end of this, is give the ladder instead of the steps. The other point that Ken wanted me to talk about, not just the focus of this initiative and how it really ties in with the research we know so far on what is going to make students succeed in STEM, was how this is a research project, and that I have been brought here to research the project to help us understand more about, you know, this isn't going to be a laboratory for understanding further these ideas that very much have been explored in research projects, but this would be a much larger kind of study than previous studies that have been done on this initiative. And there have been very few that have looked at the ways that several campuses that have put together interlocking strategies. So this would be a much broader based study than those in the past. And as Ryan said, that's what they're really interested in. Many of the studies have been done on single campuses, smaller environments, and they really want to say, can this approach be scaled though? Can we use this approach to really reach a lot of students? And that's the test, if you will, here. So I know you're going to spend a lot of time at the beginning, though. You're thinking about how do we develop these programmatic ideas, how do we implement them, and we want you to be thinking about that. But also in the back of your mind, we want you to be thinking about the fact that this is a research project in the end. We will both help facilitate that and partnering with you, but there will be some level of responsibility when you submit the RFP to think about the evaluation component. So I want to say a little bit more about what that would entail as you think about the RFP, the ways that you might want to think about evaluation. So the first question is, does an interconnected set of strategies help retain more students? So that's one of the research questions. The system office actually will be collecting that data through the dashboard system that they have. But they'll need you to check to make sure that the system data that is developed is accurate, because sometimes on individual campuses there may be anomalies or some data that didn't get reported. So we need you to help us check that data. So that will be one part of the involvement in the research. The second research question is why did it retain the student or not? Because you're all going to try out different approaches. Some of them may result in higher retention and others may not. And so there may be things that go on that have nothing to do with actually the interventions themselves. For example, you may have leadership turnover of somebody who was integral in getting the program going, and it has nothing to do with the approach itself, and that's what we want to understand. It's something, when we implement things, all sorts of things go on. So it may be more about the implementation or things that even can't, that you can't even control, again, like a turnover in leadership. So we want to know about that, those issues. So we will need you to help us in evaluating your approach. So that's one thing when you submit the RFP. You need to say, I know that the system level data will be collected that helps me to understand the retention rates and the success of students, but what's going on at the ground that I can help report so that they can understand this data better. So it's really check. Then another question we have is, what was the benefit of connecting these 3 interrelated strategies? And again, we may expand them. The conversation here already suggests we may have more than these 3 interrelated strategies, but for purposes of thought right now, that's what we'll call it, in STEM persistence. So that's where, so these next 2 are areas where I'm going to be involved with you and partnering with you. So this is where I may be coming to campus and interviewing people who are involved with the intervention. Surveys and focus groups with faculty and staff and students that were involved with the intervention will also take place. So it'll be more of a coordinating and logistics with me. But there may be ideas that you even want to put forward of ways that you would, in a sense, use my time to help you evaluate the project. So in terms of the benefits of connecting these 3 interrelated strategies, you may have ideas that contribute to this. I have several about how I'm going to look at, because one of the things that we know probably won't work, and this is tough, is that if these become 3 siloed programs, and that's often what happens, is we put new interventions in place, but they're all disconnected, and the students recognize and see that they're not integrated. So we're actually going to try to see and understand the degree to which these were integrated and connected, and how much that helped the students. So that will be one area that I'm spending time on. The other is to examine whether a series of interventions can begin to alter the behaviors within STEM departments and programs. So this is the idea of culture change. Does this start to change people's values because they participate in something that's more systemic, that connects people in ways that they're usually not connected across groups, different groups? So somebody may have never worked with somebody in student affairs or advising, and suddenly does this help them see things differently because of the intentionality of the various programs that are connected, because of the collaboration that results? And this we know is a bit of a reach, not to get anyone scared. We know this is the farthest one out there, but we're going to gather some baseline data about people's values, and then we're going to look later to see, is there some kind of shift or change that happens as a result of the project. So my plug to you is think about these questions and really try to submit ideas about evaluation plans. And we're going to take time at the first meeting then to give you feedback on it and help you with the evaluation plan. So think them through now, but we're going to work with you in partnership. And one thing that I didn't mention earlier is really seek out on your campuses social scientists who already do this kind of research. We found that people don't seek out that there are plenty of people on their campus already doing this work within either education, sociology, that you and STEM might partner with, that really easily could help you on the individual evaluation plan. So don't do this alone. This is the pitch for collaboration again. We want to set out the expectation that you're going to be involved in these various areas of research and evaluation. But again, the underlying goal of all of this is really, shared leadership for STEM student success, and that means I'm a collaborator with you. I'm part of hopefully this leadership team. I want to help you with your evaluation plans. I want to seek out to make this the best project possible. So hopefully you will see me as a collaborator towards this shared goal.
Great. Thank you very much.
Oh, and then I think we're going to do some Q&A.
We're going to leave Adriana up there for a while and do some Q&A with her. But first, I want to, I think you can see why I was so excited to land her as our evaluator. The questions that she wants to pose during this project feel to me like the next urgent work of the CSU. From touring the campuses as part of the graduation initiative and working on other student success efforts, we have seen over and over that there's no shortage of programs like this on our campuses. They have different funding streams, different leadership, different histories, different cultures. The question we want to answer is, how can we foster, at the state level, integration on our campuses among these programs to iron out those inconsistencies of messaging that you guys were talking about earlier? We really do feel like it's the next thing to do, and that there is a concerted CSU role here, that there is something we can do to make this run better, but we can't figure it out without you helping us with the research. And so even though when we were talking about this presentation, I was thinking, here's where we let them know the price tag. If you want the grant money, you got to help us do the research. The fact is, as I was standing there listening to this, I thought, well, this is what we want to work on. This is what we want to learn, right? It didn't come across, as, at least to me anyway, I don't have to do it, but it didn't come across to me as like serious sticker shock. It really sounds good, so thank you a lot. I've got some follow-up questions about this, but before I just preempt and hog everything, is there anything on your minds, either a reaction, a comment, or a question that you'd like to share right now? And I can come to you. Yes?
I'm really excited about the idea of cultural change. I think that's really awesome. But I also have a question about focusing on retention as kind of the main thing we're measuring. Is there anything we're looking at like student well-being or faculty well-being, that kind of?
That's a great question. And in fact, most of my efforts will not be focused on the retention numbers. That will be collected by the system office, but most of what I'm collecting, for example, the change in values, is much more about seeing, are we thinking differently about our work? In the interviews and focus groups that we do with, say, students and staff, it's going to look at those issues around, and this is why I want you to put those ideas. What are some of the other kinds of areas? We're going to ask them, you know, how did this make you feel towards your, you know, for the students, your own feelings of success moving on. So it's not about the retention rate, it's more about how they feel, their sense of belonging. So since I'm doing most of the interviews, focus groups, I'm going to be digging into a lot of those issues. But, you know, thinking about, again, your students, particular areas that you want to have us look at. So on the staff and faculty end, we're going to be looking at, we know changing values affects change in behaviors over time. So that's one thing that we can look at, that is, that we think down the line will lead towards culture change, which helps shift the campus to support students. And on the student side, we're gonna ask them about, you know, what sort of the precursors to retention, or sometimes it doesn't even, they'll say it's things beyond what you did everything right and there were other things going on. And so the Institute for Higher Education Policy, they do a lot of work with first generation and low income students, and they try to differentiate, you know, between and some of these things you could do something about. They have identified some campuses that with a lot of first generation college students, they stop out because they don't have the emergency funds that are needed. These campuses can say set up emergency funds. So there's things that we might be able to contribute towards that we can find for students, and others that we can do nothing about. They have 2 deaths in the family, and there's nothing that we do. We can learn about some of those kinds of things. We may not be able to do anything to better support them. So they help separate out kind of those things that we as campuses can do something about versus, you know, there are significant challenges for some of the students that we're working with that we as institutions may not be able to overcome. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments, questions, observations? One of the deliverables that these folks are going to email to Dawn at the end of the day is the roster of potential participants. And as usual, not binding, we'll keep it to ourselves. But as the teams start to think about who should be included, they're going to need the people who are willing to provide you with interview data, with focus group kind of participation, with a window into the culture, the environment, the state of mind in the department, so that you can evaluate how that's changing over time. In your experience, are there particular personality types that we should have in mind as we think about who to recruit?
We might have in the past thought about who were, you know, some key either leaders in STEM or faculty in STEM, and narrowly define maybe a team that we put together. And what I'm encouraging through all the comments throughout here is to think more broadly about maybe some partners in, you know, support programs, student affairs, institutional research is always good since we're having to be a data collection effort. Those partners, as I said, maybe in either sociology, psychology, education, who do this kind of research, who can help you on the evaluation. It'd be good to have them on a team so that you're thinking about the broadly as our team needs to involve those who can help us in the research. So those are different partners maybe than in other projects. Those individuals who help more broadly with student success that we may not have, we need to develop a relationship with. I think that's also part of this effort in thinking about the team is building new relationships and making those really authentic is going to make your implementation and your effort move forward much more smoothly. So taking the time to actually get to know partners that you haven't worked together with. A lot of times we just sort of, assemble people quickly because we've got a deadline, but really taking the time to say, we're going to work together for the next 2 or 3 years. Let's take at least a little bit of time to get to know each other so that we're going to have an authentic working group moving forward.
And for that kind of work, is there an optimum team size in your experience?
To be honest, I think that slightly larger, most people I think usually aim for 5 to 6 kind of people on a planning team, and then they'll coordinate with other people. I think that while large teams are very difficult, but I think I think that having more like 10 to 12 people, I'm thinking institutionally, and the fact that people flow in and out sometimes of these initiatives is probably a better number to aim for if you can.
Great, thank you. Reactions to any of that? All right, I'm going to... That's right. How am I on time? I should look. Where are we on the agenda? Am I okay on time? I'm going to ask you about the Delphi project then very quickly and the work that you've been doing around adjunct faculty. How can teams involve the part-timers who teach these gateway courses?
Projects that have been very successful in involving part-time faculty. And if you haven't looked at I'm sure most of you have it, I have a website that actually provides resources on how to best support part-time faculty so that they can increase student success. So it's called thechangingfaculty.org, and it's got guides there that might be really helpful for your team to use in thinking about, over the long term. As we think about this issue of the first year, it really means involving and thinking about part-time faculty and their support and success. So that's one resource for you to think about. The campuses that I've worked with that have done well at this, they recognize that there's a really nice case study that was in AAC&U's peer review that looked at Kent State's math department, and they had really low success rates with their students, and very low retention, and they used it. Can I call on you after the next meeting? Try to change these numbers because they were significantly low. So what they did is they looked at, most of the courses were taught by the introductory courses were taught by part-time faculty. So they decided one of their strategies was to consolidate some of the part-time positions into full-time positions. Not everybody has the ability to do that, but that was one strategy that they utilized because they knew that they were going to do a course redesign, and to make the students more successful, they recognized that their introductory math courses were turning students off, and they needed to make the curriculum more relevant and rethink the curriculum. And it was very hard to do that with part-time faculty. So they turned more of the positions into full-time, and then they created a program for professional development with the part-time faculty that they provided incentives for them to come. Because a lot of times we expect part-time faculty to show professional development without any funding. So they provided funding for them to participate, talked about it in their orientation when they were coming on, that this was an expectation that they were going to be obtained with the curriculum, and that it was going to be a part of it, and we expected that they would be involved in most of you are probably going to be tweaking some of these courses, or hopefully tweaking some of these courses that students go into. And if only a small number, this is the way this happened on so many initiatives I've been involved in, a handful, which is very few of the full-time tenured faculty teaching in some of that level of courses, very little changes. So you really have to be strategic and think about, if we're really, honestly going to change, culture, particularly these early courses in STEM. We have to think about ways that we're bringing in the part-time faculty in some systemic way. So I've got a lot more detailed advice for that one case study provides us with an example of the way to do it.
And a really good one. Thank you. That was, in fact, the part that I was rummaging around. When I was a department chair, I had a hard time with the adjuncts knowing how much to welcome them and include them and bring them into meetings, knowing at the same time they're not getting paid for that, right? You want to be welcoming without being exploitative. Where do you strike that balance? It's really hard. And when you talk about student success embedded in the curriculum in the lower division, you have to address that, especially if we're going for integration. And the point that you just made about that case study where they found that paying people to participate, paying those adjuncts to come, if you wanted to use this grant money for that, a part of it, it's not going to cost you 400 grand. This would be the opportunity for us to build a case that we need that funding as part of the model, right? That this made the difference for departmental coherence, for student success, so that when the grant money ends, we've got ammo to take to the trustees, for example. So please do think along the lines that Adriana was just sharing. And I've got a question over here. Charles?
Yeah. Well, Ken, I think you just answered Adriana to a certain extent too, but the importance of, I would say, creative incentives on the part of the system and on the part of the campus to get faculty buy-in, to get buy-in from the various organizations on campus that will be involved. And I guess my question is that what we're looking for? New ways to incentivize folks to really buy in and participate in these groups.
Thank you. Do you want to?
Sure. I think Ken's right. So there are ways to support part-time faculty that don't cost money, that much money, but all of it entails some funding. I think at the level we're talking about, if we're really talking about student success, some amount, at least for professional development, even a little bit, have some kind of orientation. Most campuses have something, but it may not be kind of appropriately offered at online and all the kind of different modes that it needs to be available. So sometimes even just you could use some of this money to help the really great new orientation for the faculty that's really thoughtful about the kind of innovations in student success, because we really don't have it. It's usually like, here's how you park and show up on time. It's really not about student success. So like you could maybe really update your part-time, make it available in various modes, and that could be like a one-time shot of money that could get you long-term success. The other one, though, like this one, needs to be ongoing, paid for. The incentivizing going to professional development, that is an ongoing cost. So some of these are one-time costs that you could really build in through this grant and have a big bang over the years. Others, we need to make a case so that it makes a difference for the system, for the students, and then build that into trying to change the funding, whether it's within institutions, within the system, to support that.
Perfect. Yep. So to your question, are we looking for things other than money, right? The alternative motivators, the creative incentives, I think you called them. The answer is yes, but not exclusively. We're also looking to build a case about the money, right? We went into a serious recession. We tipped way toward adjunct faculty. The trustees and the chancellor and the faculty senate have all expressed a commitment to re-up the number of full-time faculty we're involving, get that back in balance. But the other reality is we are always going to have a lot of adjunct faculty. And shortchanging them on professional development opportunities is a short-term expedient in a recession that we should not settle for in the long run. And we have an opportunity to gather some data that shows it's a bad investment as well. Yes?
You just mentioned gathering data, and this is something that I'm sure Adriana's thought about, and we've been a little concerned about as we've been looking into planning our program. It's a short window that we have funded. We have some data that really is longer term data. How should we think about how best to get the data at our 3-year window for the grant. Some of these things may really take a lot longer to see.
Thank you. Yes.
And it was one of our first discussions. I said, this is very typical. Almost every grant project I've been involved with in the last 20 years has too short a time frame. And I do talk to foundations a lot about we need longer time frames. And many give no cost extensions for data windows, for example. They recognize the difficulty of the shorter time frames, yet they have their own pressures from their boards and other groups that want things done on a certain timing basis. So this is this tension that we have talked about. I'm going to let Ken talk a little bit about this, and then I'll jump back in at the end and talk about my side of how I see the data.
That sounds great. Yes, point taken. It sucks. This timeline, it is so wildly unrealistic, right? And we said so to Ryan Kelsey, who you saw on the Skype. On the other hand, we didn't say no thanks to $4.5 million to get this thing off the ground. He is facing the challenge that Adriana just expressed. He gets it. He knows. He does this stuff and he talks to people. It's his board who are impatient. They want results. They're from other areas of the world where 3 years doesn't sound like quick turnaround, right? Only in higher ed would we go, are you kidding? Only 3 years? So he's educating his board on our behalf. So you have that. I do think the chance of either a no-cost extension, he's kind of said don't count on it, but he's also said we don't see this as the last step in our relationship with the CSU. I'll take it, man. If the choice is take the money we have and extend it or ask him for more money in 2.5 years, we'll ask him for more money, right? And that door is definitely open. The other thing is that Dawn and I, along with creating the logo, arranging the parking for this meeting, talking with Dominguez Hills, she and I have also been brainstorming about what to do after Helmsley. We see the STEM Collaboratives container as getting a vital jump start out of the Helmsley Trust, but it ain't the last word. So all of the data that we're trying to collect with you, we want to stay in touch with you, with Adriana. We want to keep the team together. We want to keep the life support going until we've really learned all we can out of a project like this. So we're pretty optimistic that one way or another, this is going to last more than 2.5 years. On the other hand, there are no guarantees ever. And so we do want to hear from Adriana about what we can do in the very short term to sort of insulate ourselves against things that aren't meaningful.
Don't get funded in next rounds or that don't move forward, there isn't a careful assessment and evaluation, a research plan built in. There's nothing to kind of describe, to help demonstrate what's happened. And although again the funders don't expect the retention rates to go through the roof, I think I think Ryan's really reasonable about recognizing is I'm going to be looking for breadcrumbs along the way that would suggest things are going in the right direction. And that's why, because he recognizes that the hard numbers may not change, but we may have some softer indicators before, and those will be compelling and meaningful. And if I went back to a couple of those. So if we're able to show, for example, that connecting, let's say right now, as I said, we all have, most of the research shows that we give step stools, and we're going to try to put a ladder together at least. It's like it's the start of the ladder, but at least if we can show there are some indicators that by connecting a series of strategies, here are some of the things that seem to be coming out of it that are positive. So that would be, so I'm going to be talking to people about what's happening on campus and what do students feel that's different before there's a hard retention indicator. That's why I'm trying to collect this earlier kind of data that might be illustrative of the changes that are going on prior, because we know to really shift, kind of student success will take longer. So these are the step stools. So all the pieces that you see I built in are to try to feel our way before that, the initial indicators that we talked to Ryan about. And so I think he knows that. So that's why I have the plan in place that I do. I think it can show some of those things. I've done it on other projects because I've done a lot of projects around institutional change, so I know what are those kind of early factors that we should be seeing and looking for. demonstrate to a funder that we're headed in the right direction.
Excellent. Thank you. I think you were next, right? Yes.
So I'm just curious about, we're supposed to integrate these three, the summer experience, the gateway courses, and the first year experience. And for students that don't get to the gateway course sometimes because of their remediation or math levels so much later, how are we going to, I mean, the interconnection's going to vary depending on how soon the students can take the gateway course. So just curious about if, are the proposal reviewers, are people going to be open to the idea that we're going to have multiple strategies for different groups of students?
Well, this goes
Wonderful.
back
Thank
to
you.
my initial point that there's a lot of consensus around, which is this, that students have a complex pathway. So it's really good that this is coming out at the same time as this NRC report is coming out that says, boy, we've got this image of this linear way that students go through, and that is wrong. There is no, I think that could be death to the pipeline. There is no pipeline. No. There are, as I told you, chutes and ladders, all these complex pathways. So I would say what you aim to suggest is for your campus, what's that complex pathway look like? And then how can you, as you think about the evaluation, set up things that capture these different pathways? That's why I was pointing to this, like there's this acknowledgement of this, thank God, probably, that students don't go through, the linear pathway just through four-year institutions, just through all the courses without any remediation. We're hopefully busting that myth, and with it, you should feel free to say, well, this gives us an opportunity to look at what are those complex pathways on our specific campus, and when do they interact with these interventions, and how can we link them as best we can? But it's going to be imperfect, right? But at least knowing that better. That's part of, I think, the project is many campuses don't even know all the complex pathways that their students go through. We kind of know in general they're not, but we haven't really charted that. And so one of the recommendations from this NRC report is going to be the need for campuses, this is why your IR person is so important, to collect individual data on your campuses that speak to how students are migrating through STEM, and that you really understand that, and that that's part of the student success equation, understanding your own data around student pathways.
Great. Thank you. Really good question. Yeah, that is on. Okay. You, and then I'll come to you. Thanks, Stephanie.
I had a question about why the selection of summer bridge as opposed to something like dual enrollment or dual programming in the senior year, because it has implications for sustainability and scalability. Is there any flexibility in that?
Right. And the question, these mics are going in and out. I learned that it's because we have interference from other wireless signals. It's not your phones, it's other stuff going on in the building. So I'm going to repeat Stephanie's question just because you're a little soft-spoken. The question was, there's three givens of the interventions, right? There's the immersive summer experience, first-year experience, and gateway courses that we're looking for integration on. Why summer? Why not concurrent enrollment during senior year of high school, which has a better prospect of long-term financial sustainability? And the answer is, first of all, because we had to start somewhere, so we just made a decision. It had to be a bounded experiment in some senses. So there's a bit of arbitrariness to it. I would say the other reason that summer sparked my bosses, Helmsley, and our trustees as this project took shape was because we had this experience with Summer Bridge in the CSU, which for decades has been a powerhouse for student success, and then what we consider centrally a lighter weight investment in student success over the summer for those who need remediation, which is the early start programs. They are inconsistent around the system, and the early data in on their efficacy is promising, but the jury is hardly in. And yet that early start experience that said, wow, we may be onto something. We've got a couple of campuses producing data on that are very encouraging. Those two, I think, were fresh in our minds. And so that's why we said, get them now, get them acclimated to college, get them thinking about it before they're freshmen with the rest of the herd. Other designers of the project are sitting right at this table. Am I leaving anything out, or were there other reasons we talked about summer in particular that I'm forgetting? Okay, so I think I've shared the whole story on it. Yes. Oh, I had Bob next. But I'll. Okay, if you're sure. All right.
So, I buy into the complex pathways. I buy into the need to integrate services and to move on multiple fronts. I understand the limitations of the time. You opened up this one of my favorite areas, and that is, what sucks about the program. And so that sucks, and you brought that up. There are two other things I want to put on the table. One is that the funding follows the typical CSU style of funding. Give us 1/10 the money that we need to have in order to do this huge project, and expect us to get it done, and then ask us to collect data at points that you're not telling us about, that are going to lead to that long-term piece. There are a lot of data out there about these intermediate indicators, the places where we could collect those short-term data that indicate success in the long term. And it just seems like that this is part of the plan that should be in place for us all to target, so that instead of our guessing the ones that you think are best, and having you say, aha, I got it, instead you ought to give us those. We ought to know what those data collection points are. We ought to be able to all set up that collection of data at the same time, so that we have some common reporting characteristics that come from all the teams, rather than have multiple other things. So I know you can't fix the dollar figure right now.
Yeah.
Maybe you can fix that data collection.
Yes. Thank you. And point taken and guilty as charged. Here they go again, giving us too little money, asking for the world, and then, aha, got you. We didn't tell you about that part. I know. We do try to get over that from time to time. We have New Year's resolutions to that effect. More honestly, on the money point, yes, it's too little. We are trying to raise more money. One thing that I didn't tell you, Deborah David, who's sitting at that table up front, many of you know her from the Give Students a Compass project. That one started out years ago on only 3 campuses. We did an RFP around the system. We had a dozen proposals. We could only fund 3. We took the other 9 and raised the rest of the money and said, look, they're shovel ready. Same strategy at work here, right? So even though it's not enough money to do what we're hoping to do in terms of systemic change, we're optimistic to get more. You also made the point it's not enough money just to do the things we're asking for on a single campus, which we also understand, but there's limits. Okay. On the other one, the goalposts and guess where we're measuring, part of that is because we want to wait until we know what you're picturing, what you're proposing, so that we calibrate the moments of when do we take the snapshot and share the data to relevant moments as the work unfolds. The typical predictable moments are going to be census date in the fall term, who's still enrolled, who's completing, what was their GPA when those get made available the following term. None of those that you have to provide to us. As Adriana pointed out, we've got a dashboard at the system office for that, right? The other ones that in particular are the evaluation work of this project around, is the culture changing? How do people feel? When should we interview them? That too, we have assumptions coming in on when it's going to be appropriate to ask those questions, but we don't want to preempt them. We want them to be informed by the work you're actually doing. There will be a kickoff meeting for the 8 or so selected campuses in the fall. There's a save the date written at the top of the RFP so that you can participate in that meeting. We plan to use that meeting to agree with you on the consensus dates, snapshots, metrics, to do exactly what you're saying, right? Not keep you guessing until it's too late to do anything, but agree with you as a group, here's what's relevant, here's what we think we can capture. I'm going to give you the chance to respond too.
Yeah, no, Ken has been very thoughtful in all of our conversations about saying, let's make sure people know that evaluation research are a part of this, that they know what's already going to be taken care of, like what the system office is doing, what what kinds of things I'm going to be doing, and it will only really involve you working logistics with me, like providing me lists of faculty and staff. You won't have to do any of the work, and we'll give you all the sort of timing for that and all the details. So I think there's minimal work on my side, except for it's going to be some logistics setup, minimal work in some of the in the numerical data. I think that the we don't know what your RFPs are going to look like. So to tell you how you would evaluate your specific individual projects on the outset, would be very, very difficult. But that's what the first meeting's about.
That's right.
Is for us to work with you on thinking through some of those local evaluation plans. What's the most meaningful given the goals of your particular project? And we're going to have a lot of time to brainstorm that in October. So we're hoping that there aren't any surprises. And Ken's been really thoughtful about saying, I don't want to surprise anybody. Let's tell everybody the data. And there is, written in you will be getting data on students. And part of the project is we want the teams to be reflecting on that data. So there's going to be a lot of support on our end to provide data and to collect data. So I hope that's coming through, and that we're trying to create a really thoughtful plan that means you're a partner in it, but it's not offloading a lot of this independently on you, except for that piece of looking through the sort of why did your interventions work or not piece. That's the one piece that we need more on, because it's going to be more campus specific.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I did want to go back to you and just find out how that sounded.
Just one quick follow-up. So the data collection, when I first read this, I thought, okay, we're talking about student success data. Then I hear the discussion, we see a lot of cultural change data.
Next, you saw the dashboard data is all student success. So the first two pieces are all student success data. Just so you're on.
Okay, so the question is, and there's perhaps a third piece, and that is program performance data, sort of an assessment of the entire program piece. And so it's not clear to me when you talk about data collection, if you're talking about all of these, an integrated element of these. And again, it seems like this ought to be something that we're doing similarly in all programs.
Especially if it's going to go to dashboard.
Yeah, especially if it's going to show up on the data dashboard, as was pointed out here. So point taken, we're going to try to stay in sync with you as this unfolds and do it as with as little burden to you as we possibly can, and still get the meaningful evidence that we want. Oh, I was going to go to you next, right? Okay. There you are, Joanne. Thank you.
Just very quick, I'm hearing that you folks are open to some creative work that may be done through existing early start programs that we have on our campuses.
Yes, and you are hearing correctly. The question was, are you open to creative work that might be done through existing early start programs? And the answer is yes. One of the things we heard loud and clear when we presented this to the provosts around the system was, oh God, another STEM student success effort? Are you kidding? Do you know how many of these we have? We don't want to add to that list, right? We just want the list made rational, made integrated, made intentional, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, take what you got going and figure out how to harness it to these ends. EOP Summer Bridge, yeah. So long as Adriana said about the multiple pathways depending on the remediation they may need, so long as you can track it and help us figure out what's working and what isn't, yeah. Yeah. Okay, good, thank you. And yes.
I just wanted to say back what I'm understanding a little bit about this, why does it retain students or not? Because maybe to simplify it a little bit, because when you ask why something, from my perspective, that is so broadly abstract that it's hard to get at. But for me, what I hear is, how do these approaches unfold? What happens? And what can we identify in whatever approach we take to look at that, the factors or conditions that support it going on and doing something, and the factors that are constraining it. And that's the way we can get to the why. But if we look at how it unfolds, somehow, whatever our approach is, to just be able to, that stuff, those two columns, the stuff that's supporting it and the stuff that's getting in the way, that's going to help us get to the why.
Absolutely. Perfect way to think about it.
Good. Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Okay. All right.
Summer Bridge program. This is something we've been wrestling with too. Our campus has summer bridge program for us is a residential program, which is really expensive. We can't ask them to pay for it. This doesn't provide us enough money to pay for more than a small cohort of students. So if we want a broad impact and everything needs to be integrated, we're sort of hitting a wall. So if you could help us while we're here, try to parse how to deal with that, that would be great. There are probably some other campuses who have that same problem.
Yes, thank you very much for raising that. I'm going to turn to you in a sec to respond to that particular. Okay, then I won't. All right, here's the, in the revision, this came up on a couple of conference calls that Dawn and I had with the campuses too. It says all students, and you're thinking, dear God, all students in STEM? That's a mistake, candidly. I mean, we tried to get, it used to say that all over the RFP, and we thought we had gotten rid of them all, and now there's one or two left. What we meant was close the gaps, get at the students from all backgrounds, be inclusive. It doesn't mean that in return for the money that you're dispersed, if you get one of these grants, you save STEM for all those majors on your campus. We know you can't. We know, in fact, even based on what you said, testing something reliably in enough depth that you're actually making a difference, you can't hit a whole lot of students. That's okay too. Just make sure that what you learned from it can be applied for the benefit of students from all populations. Okay? All right, I had a question back here.
Hi, Adriana. Good to see you. I was really excited to see what you're going to evaluate of the project. I have a question because I know your areas of expertise is the higher ed scholars. I'm going to ask you to offer some advice that may not be directly related to evaluation. But I think there's probably a number of us in the room that need to work with critical faculty partners to impact engagement or flat out uncooperative. And when attempting collaboration with these faculty, you get the message, I have academic freedom and I don't need to collaborate. So I'm wondering, given your expertise on higher education leadership, particularly for deans, associate deans, program directors, VPs, what you have in a way of advice to offer us about how to be strategic about that. And again, I know your areas of expertise, so I think you might have something useful to say.
Great.
That's a great question. So
Yes, thank you. That was great.
You challenged us to partner across a lot of different groups, one of them being faculty, who often describe their academic freedom to not participate and partner in an initiative and to do what they want in their classroom, and may not be open to this kind of initiative or effort, but are essential, right? So hopefully I paraphrased that well. And she also mentioned the role of leadership and saying this issue. And I think that's a perfect segue. So I think depending on, this may vary by the teams who are here. So those of you who have some member of your leadership that's here, either a dean or associate dean, those are important roles for those individuals to play in terms of talking about this is an important value or priority that the leaders can signal and try to encourage gracefully why involvement in this is really important. But others of you may be on teams that, at least here or even as you convene, may not have somebody who can create those kinds of signals. And then I often talk about, like, as more bottom-up leaders, we need to be more sometimes political and see who can be influential. So it might be, is there a faculty member or two on your campus who does believe in student success that you can draw into this effort? Maybe they're really involved in, let's say, some other X grant effort, and you don't think you can draw them into this particular effort, but you might be able to draw them into it, at least talking about how, because that you know that they're motivated by student success, they can talk about the value of this kind of initiative for the campus, and maybe have some ways that they're marginally involved to create support. So it's looking for who might be influential to the STEM faculty that we need to address. Is there somebody in administration who can reach those people? Is there another influential faculty member who might be able to persuade them? And this will take time, and it's worth the time. That's the effort to step back. I think too often what we do is we say, you know what, those people don't want to be assemble at the table and maybe get a few champions. And I think you do got to run with the champions. So identify who the faculty champions are. But I think that we can't be preoccupied with some of the resistors. But if there are people that we genuinely, would be beneficial to have more part of it, it's worth spending the kind of time figuring out the strategy to get them to think about this as an important initiative. So I know that that doesn't give you direct advice, but it's a way to think about some strategies to, and to not give up. I mean, because ultimately, right, if we're successful with this, we're going to start to break down that culture. And I've seen it on many campuses where the faculty start to see more their role as a collective with others in the department to support student success. And that's what we want to aim for. So if we do just say, oh, too many of these faculty are resistant and ignore it, we're really not going to change the culture, and we're ultimately not going to help students. So even though it's not fun and it's uncomfortable, and it may take some, kind of feel like putting your head against the wall a few times, I think it's worth the kind of the priority setting and the trying to influence people over time.
Thank you. That was great. Okay, so I'm already past the time that I was going to have for this slot. So I think I'm going to cut it off unless there's one last question. Anyone want to ask?
I'll be around today if people want to ask me any particular questions you didn't raise here.
Thank you.